What up, Winbush here. And if you've been a fan of the channel for a while, you know that I love going hiking. And while I'm out hiking, I do love building out my own digital library, whether that's from textures or actually doing 3D scans. And so recently, this company, 3DeVOK, reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested in checking out their 3D scanner. And I, of course, said absolutely, because on my last hike, I actually did come across this pretty dope stick that I wanted to scan, because if you look at it, it has a ton of detail in there. I thought it would be really cool for my digital library. And so I figured, let's give this a spin and see exactly what it could do. Now, I don't want to bore you with all the different specs and everything about this scanner. I mean, this is pretty high end. I want to make this a little bit more personal about how I personally use these for my project, and so you can see how I use this for whenever I'm doing my scanning. But to get started with the scan, what I did was I went outside to scan this one because I wanted to be able to take advantage of the natural sunlight out there. So with my table set up, I put down my scanning dots that I typically use there. They're just built off of Dungeons & Dragons dice, and then I put the scanning dots on there just so I have a good point of reference for my 3D scan. So I set that up there with the stick, and then I did several different scans because I just wanted to test the hardware out and see exactly how it could do. And I would say right off the bat, I was extremely impressed with how fast it was. Like, as soon as I hit the play button right there on the back of the screen, it just automatically started picking everything up, which I was really impressed by, because sometimes with other hardware that I have, it does do good scans, but it might take a little bit for it to process. So for my first test that I did here, I did just the 3D scan with the laser. I didn't do any texturing with it, in which I was impressed with how dense the 3D scan was coming out. But since I want to catch the stick at all angles, I didn't have a way to prop it up. So the way that I go about this is you can actually do 3D stitching within the software there. So you just want to make sure that you carefully flip your stick over on the other side and make sure you don't hit any other tracking dots, because I want those to be a point of reference for whenever I go to stitch these in. And once I have it flipped on the other side, you go again from the complete beginning. You're just going to scan your object all the way through. And then once you're done, you should be able to combine those together with the auto stitching. Now, I wasn't able to get this right off the bat. I did have to do some test runs. Like, some things that I ran into was whenever I was doing my initial scan, I didn't tell it what was the floor level. And so when I went to do an auto stitch, it didn't have a point of reference on what exactly you should be stitching up. You definitely want to select your tracking dots there, hit up at the top, make a floor. And every time you do a scan, you make sure you select that. And then when you go to auto stitch, you're going to be able to stitch that all together. But with the scanner, on top of having a laser blue light scanner, it does have infrared as well, or you could do a hybrid, which is what I did for my final result. So I went through and I scanned it again, but this time I used a hybrid, because with hybrid, I'm able to get the laser scanner, plus I'm able to scan the textures as well. So as I'm scanning it through, I can see exactly the high level of detail that I'm getting in my texture and on my scan. And once I'm done with that, I'm able to go through and I'm able to auto stitch that together. Now, you can't look at this mesh and not tell me that this is highly detailed. Like, this is a really good scan. Even though it took me a couple attempts to get there, once I got comfortable with the software, I'm able to pull out scans just like this. Like, if we're looking at just the stick without the texture, you can see that the mesh is really super dense, which, you know, if I'm doing the render of it, that's good. If I want to use this for gameplay or something of that nature, there are ways that I could go through and kind of decimate it out. I'm going to show you that here in a minute. But I would say for a raw scan, this is really good. And then if I put the texture back on it, even the texture detail is probably some of the best that I've seen out of a 3D scanning application. But even though this is a good base, I want to show you exactly what I do whenever I go to enhancing my 3D scans. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it into my DCC, which I'm using Cinema 4D, because this is just with any type of photogrammetry or hardware scanning that you're doing. Whenever you have your 3D model, the axis is always going to be off to the side. So the first thing I like to do is open it up in my 3D software, align the axes, get everything lightened up, everything straightened up. And then from there, I'm going to bring it over to Adobe Substance Modeler. Now, the reason I bring it in here is because this is where I like to smooth out my model and decimate it and just make the UVs a lot more cleaner. So if I go through and I clean this out and then I bring it back into my 3D application, if I run these side by side, you can see that this is the raw one on the right-hand side, and this is the one that I cleaned up on the left-hand side. We still have most of the detail there because we're going to get a lot of detail back in our texture, but you can see the one that's on the left is a lot more lightweight, and that's going to be a lot easier for most people to digest on their systems. So now that I'm happy with my 3D scan so far, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this 3D scan, the lightweight one, and I'm going to bring it into Quixel Bridge. Now, Quixel Bridge is a free application. It's no longer in development, but you can use it for texturing up your 3D objects fairly well. And these are the final results of what I did. So I was able to layer stack on some mega scan materials, put some stuff in the crevices, add a little bit more dirt to it. And then I put my final texture on top of it to bring all that detail back in. And I'm pretty happy with the results so far. They do have a wireless solution that you can hook up to this. So that might be something that I have to talk to them about, maybe getting my hands on that one, because even though this is a good scanner, I was tripping up over the wire a little bit whenever I was trying to scan the stick out there, whether it's outside or inside my living room. But, that's the only negative thing I could say about this, which that's not really a negative.